power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to give an update on his promises to end small boats crossing the Channel and how he plans to tackle the asylum backlog. In a speech tomorrow, Rishi Sunak will discuss the progress he's already made in the 6 months since the introduction of the illegal migration bill. It's after the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, claimed the asylum system is riddled with abuse and needs fundamental change. The PM had vowed to abolish the backlog in asylum cases this year. It currently stands at more than 150,000. The Labour leader is accusing the Conservative Party of a failure to open any nuclear power plants during their 13 years in government. Ahead of a planned visit tomorrow to a plant in Somerset, Sir Keir Starmer has stressed the critical need for nuclear to drive growth, boost energy security and tackle the climate crisis. But a Tory spokesperson says they're delivering the first large-scale nuclear project at Hinkley Point C and have agreed last year to begin Sizewell C. Authorities in India say a signal failure was likely responsible for the country's worst train crash in decades. 275 people were killed in the accident. Another 1,200 were injured when a passenger train hit a stationary freight train before derailing and striking a second passenger train. India's Railway Board has recommended the investigation be handed over to the country's federal authorities. The family of a 17-year-old boy who died after being pulled from the sea off Bournemouth Beach have said they are heartbroken and devastated. Joe Abess from Southampton and a 12-year-old girl who's named in reports as Suna Khan from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire both died in the incident, which involved 10 swimmers. A sightseeing boat named the Dorset Belle has been impounded by police. And the Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court tomorrow to give evidence on the witness stand against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information gathered using unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. You're up to date on GB News now. It's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Nick Dixon, the People's presenter, and I'm joined by Paul Cox, the thinking man's gammon, and Lewis Schaefer, who only eats gammon. How about that? What a coincidence.
Yeah, at least I'm not a gammon.
Yeah, you're some sort of other category. You could be an honorary gammon. So how are we doing? Lewis, 3 nights in a row of you. Quite a lot, isn't it?
I don't know. It's up to the people to decide. I'm actually fed up with looking at this audience that's watching me right now. They're not fed up with me, but I'm fed up with them. Bring some new people.
There's the name, in case anyone's forgotten. Tweet at him later.
Tweet at
criticisms of his performance. You're sort of like cake, Lewis, which is ironic because you don't eat any cake. You're sort of like, it's nice in moderation, but 3 nights in a row could be too much. What do you think?
It could be too much. I'm not used to working this much, and I think people, once they get to know me, because I seem like a great guy, basically.
I was going to say exactly the same about Paul.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Paul. You're in the show a lot now. We love it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely... I love it.
And you've lost weight. You're looking great.
I've been on holiday. I've lost weight.
Lewis Schaefer even told me I've lost weight. That's how incredible. You never get that from Lewis. It's nearly
No, you
always
don't.
that you're fat.
You never get that.
And you've got your massive garden, but we'll talk about that later. You've been tweeting your garden.
Yeah, I know, I shouldn't
I've
have
got garden envy. All right, we've got to look at the front pages. It is called headliners. Let's start with the Telegraph. And lockdown benefits a drop in the bucket compared to the costs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Infuriating story. Daily Mail, record demand for 35-year mortgages as rates keep rising. The Eye has Generation AI most fearful of losing their jobs to robots. The Times, unions lambast Labour over naive energy plan. The Sun, Phil, I won't watch Holly. And finally, the Daily Star, where oven-ready Brits, which is something about the weather, presumably. And those were your front pages. All right, Lewis, what's on the front of the Telegraph?
Well, it's the Daily Telegraph, and it says lockdown benefits, quote, a drop in the bucket compared to the costs. Like quelle surprise, as I think the French would say.
Excellent French.
We've been saying it for years. I mean, I'm glad the Telegraph is getting on this on this COVID denialism. What would you call it? Would you call it a COVID denialism bandwagon? I don't remember them being that gung-ho saying it was a load of nonsense. Thank you for putting the word in my mouth. Load of nonsense. At the time, I did, and I was one of the first people to tweet this.
Yes, I was very early as well. I was on a certain radio station, we won't name, but a station. I was talking about it a lot with Mr. Mark Dolan. You were talking about it. How about you, Paul? Were you quite...
No, I wasn't. Do you know what? I'll come to this in a sec. I wasn't actually. So I wasn't someone who... I was kind of agnostic at first. I sat back and waited. I didn't understand enough. So when we went into lockdown, I actually had COVID. So, ironically, just had it on that week in March of 2020. So it was all a bit of a blur for me. So I felt like I couldn't get to grips with it all. I didn't really know what was going on. But for me, this. I know it's in the Telegraph, but this should be an apolitical story. The outrage should be ubiquitous across the whole demographic of everybody. Now, this is not about denying COVID or denying anything. This is about looking... I wish they'd frame it slightly differently because they say compared to the cost. Now, you can take cost to mean almost anything. It's saying there were only 1,700 deaths. Now, there's a lot of emotion involved in 1,700 deaths, so you can't call that a cost in a financial term because I don't think you can quantify it.
Yes, you can.
Well, OK, but I don't think you can. However, one thing I would say is it's quite clearly the evidence has been there for a long time. It was there by the end of the first lockdown that what we were doing was going to be more problematic in the long term than it would have been solving problems in the short.
You know what? You're agnostic. But, I mean, at the time, I actually said this was going to cost... And at the time, I meant March. I said this is going to cost way more. And because, basically, this guy, Neil Ferguson, who a lot of people out there know, he's the guy behind the Neil Ferguson effect. Or the Ferguson-Neil effect. There's a bit of a debate of whether it's called. It's when somebody is considered to be the leader, the most important person in his field, who's got total credentials, is the biggest idiot.
Yeah, you mentioned that the other night, and I agree. But, yeah, so it's a pretty devastating study. It's from Johns Hopkins and London University, presumably not what they're doing. They've examined 20,000 studies, so I suppose it's a meta-study. And we never had a cost-benefit analysis, and this was the thing. Yeah. And only later, much later, did people start talking about that, The Spectator. Yeah. Early on would be people like the Daily Skeptic, more alternative sort of media, and people like Jay Bhattacharya, Carl Hennigan, experts raising questions. We've never really had a proper inquiry. Even the lockdown files didn't sort of go anywhere. They had a bit of an impact, but it hasn't really been taken up. And now you've got this Baroness Hallett, who's got this inquiry. The government are even trying to make things difficult for her. So I'm very disturbed by the fact we've never really reckoned with lockdowns and the fact that it's only been dealt with in the Telegraph. And now it's apparently some sort of right-wing issue, which is bizarre.
Well, this is what I was
a massive wealth transfer to the already very wealthy.
I totally agree. That's what... And fair play to the Telegraph, and that's why I think this should become apolitical. I can't see why The Guardian can't be talking about this as well. They should absolutely be talking about the cost of assault, and we're not going to find out. I think we're all invested in this, by the way, left and right, in finding out the truth behind what brought about everything that happened during the lockdowns. And it's going to get pushed out into the long grass, and by the time we actually find out, the people in charge will be in the Lords. Yeah. It won't really matter any longer.
You know what? You're expecting there to be it's all going to come out. It was all out there.
Yeah,
everybody knew. Not everybody knew, but there was enough data at the time in March to know that this was going to be a bad thing, and they didn't investigate it. And is it a left or a right issue? Well, they've decided that masks are left and no masks are right. So this is obviously a right issue. This isn't. I think.
Right. And the mainstream media also has a lot to answer for. Not GB, of course, but all these peston-type people who didn't ask the right question. Their only question was, why aren't we locking down longer and harder? And it's like a real failure. We've got to move on, though. Paul, what are the Mail leading with?
Record demand for 35-year mortgages as rates keep rising. Now, this is all about people taking out longer and longer-term mortgages. This is much more of a sort of sensible economics type story rather than anything else from reading it, because, of course, when rates are high, people are going to borrow for longer. And the point they're making here is, it's great in the short term, but they'll be paying into their 70s. By the way, lots of people still pay into their 70s, irrespective of rates. However, if you're bright, that over the term of those 35 years, rates will go up and down. And you know, no one's fixing for 35 years. So in 2 years' time, if they're up, then, you know, keep it at 35 or whatever. But if it comes down, then bring the length of term down as well. So it's just about managing your expectations. Don't buy a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah, although you're one of these people, I was going to check with you before the show if you were OK with me mentioning this. You're one of those people who got into the housing market just like sickeningly early.
I did. I was 20. And no, I don't mind you mentioning, Nick. And I brought it upon myself, to be honest, because I tweeted about my lovely garden. I love my garden. Everyone knows.
I was disgusted. But I was like, from my London perspective, I was like, how is this even possible? I was looking at grass. I was confused.
And I did. I bought my first house when I was 20. Didn't pay it off, but I took my first mortgage out when I was 20.
But how could they give you a mortgage at 20? Did you have a job at 20?
Yeah, I did, This is it. I didn't do university in the traditional sense. I did university as a day release from the job I was doing. I was training as an electronics engineer, so I was being sent by my employer to university.
And you were making money at the same time. Yeah. But I agree with Paul totally, because why do I always agree with Paul? Because he's right. People should have a 35-year mortgage. I had a 5-year mortgage, and now I'm paying the price for it. Basically, but they did give me 10 years of like super low interest rate. So in the long run, I probably will make out.
And I don't even have a mortgage, and I'm the presenter. What's going on?
This is the wrong way round.
Something's going wrong.
Oh, did I just reveal that I have a mortgage?
Yeah, Louis, you're not the working class underdog we all thought. No. You're the man.
I'd like to thank Murray.
You're a slumlord.
Murray Schaefer for that.
But yeah, I mean, maybe we can move on from this. But the one thing, I mean, the only strange thing is that interest rates used to be high when we were growing up. They're like 10%. Not when Lewis was growing up. Different time. There was slates and things. But when we were growing up, it was like 10%. And people just got to get used to that again. And it's good for people who are saving, who are trying to one day get on the ladder, I suppose, even though that's impossible. But it's not so good if you have a mortgage that's rapidly rising, right?
No, you're absolutely right. They were 15% at one point when we were younger.
Yeah. Simpler times. All right, what's on the cover of the Times, Lewis?
Well, it says unions lambast Labour over naive energy plan. GMB, which is one of those unions, follows Unite, which is another one of those unions, in criticising a proposed ban on new drilling licence for the North Sea oil and gas, which Starmer proposes. He proposes and so they're saying to him, you got to back down on this because we need drilling and we need the money. Scotland needs the money, and it's more jobs. But at the very same time, the Labour leader is urged to stick to a plan in a letter signed by 139 organisations, including Campaign to Protect Rural England and the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds and the National Federation of Women's Institutes, to ban oil and gas. What?
Yeah. Well, I was glad about this, that some actual unions are doing the old Labour thing and actually concerned about working class and jobs and things like that. And they're saying this is reckless and it'll be like the coal mines, it's being done far too fast. And then I looked at The Guardian, they had like the other angle of like, no, Starmer's being backed in this ban. And very much, it's very strange. Again, things are very confused. The Times are sort of backing the working class argument. The Guardian are backing the sort of net zero madness. What do you think, Paul?
There's so much going on here. I mean, Vision Zero or whatever. Net Zero. Net Zero. Vision Zero is something about road safety. It's completely different. But Net Zero is going to bankrupt the world. It's going to bankrupt the Western world if we carry on ploughing at it like the economics of it don't matter. No. We just keep going, no. It's just, we can't keep having moral crusades. Moral crusades don't keep people alive. Economics keeps people alive, and we need to start looking at this from an economic position. I've said millions of times before, you need to have everything on the table. Fracking, if need be, because you need to be able to become energy sufficient. However, this is just the beginning, because this is the start, isn't it? Labour are going to win the next general election, and for the 4 years after that, we're just going to see the unions sat on the sidelines saying you're doing it wrong. And they'll eventually crumble because their paymasters will fall out with them and we'll have a Conservative government again.
Because the unions control, what, 1/3 of the votes in the thing?
Yeah.
They have a major control of...
Well, I'm no fan of the unions, but I hate net zero even more. But it's a pity that only Reform UK, the only ones I've heard seriously try to tackle this amongst the, and they're not even a mainstream party. The mainstream parties are really not tackling the unrealistic nature of net zero.
Reform UK don't seem to be controlled by anything. There seems to be, I don't want to sound conspiratorial here, but it feels like everybody's being controlled by some narrative.
By Klaus Schwab. It's Klaus Schwab, WEF.
There you go. That's
All right,
exactly
and
it.
finally, what's on the cover of the Eye, Paul?
Generation AI most fearful of losing their jobs to robots. This is more about AI, Nick, and this is about the Generation AI. I assume they're talking about the younger generation here and about how robots are going to take over. Of course they are. We're all going to be dead, so let's not worry about it. However, the story that's really caught my eye here is just to the left of the headline, and it's by Rebecca Reed, who says men who cheat on extraordinary wives are broken. So this is... So what about men who treat on average wives?
Good question. Yeah, I like this. It's sort of like AI is going to take over the world, and by the way, men are evil. Just on the side, in case you've forgotten for one day, men are toxic and evil.
And what about men who cheat on just plain horrible, ugly wives? And
what about men who leave their wives to use AI to destroy us all? They're the worst of all.
What this article to me is, it says basically 52% of young adults aged 18 to 24 are concerned that artificial intelligence systems will damage their employment prospects. So what this story is like, congratulations to us. We've made 52% of young men and women scared and panicking.
And we've got to go, but it's actually, that was the first time Lewis Schaefer has brought us back to the story, and the fact, that was amazing. I never thought I'd see it. There he is, at Lewis Schaefer. All right, that's it for part one, but coming up, Rishi in trouble, karma for Just Stop Oil, and a policeman is spotted doing his actual job. See you in 2 minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Nick Dixon, still here with Paul Cox and his elderly dependent, Lewis Schaefer. So sorry, Lewis. I don't know why I did that. And the I now, and Rishi Sunak's approval rating has plummeted to a new low from its previous position of already very low, Lewis.
Very, very low. It says Rishi Sunak's approval rating plummets as he nearly loses half of 2019 Conservative voters because they don't want to vote for him because it's not really a Conservative party. And like all the parties, they're splitting in half. And it says that the only people who like Rishi Sunak, basically, are older people like my age and up. But the young Generation X, he's got a negative 34%, according to this study.
And I wonder what's sort of done this for him. I mean, the fact that it's coming out now makes me wonder if it's the immigration figures, the 606,000 net immigration, which many people said would bury the Tories. It can't help, can it? Or is it just the fact that he hasn't managed to really do anything yet? He hasn't enacted any of his policies? Is it a bad economy? Is it Boris coming back in? What do you think, Paul?
No, I think he probably inherited a bit of a sinking ship. If anything, he's quietened down the rhetoric a bit, which has helped calm things. So from that perspective, for me, Rishi Sunak has done a relatively good job in terms of getting us back to talking about policies rather than what Boris was up to in the last couple of weeks, which was getting terribly boring. However, I'm not convinced that approval ratings link directly to electoral success. I mean, it's a bit like measuring shoe size, isn't it? It doesn't make any difference. It's not compared to anything.
They did say it points to a Labour landslide. But if based on this, the Tories would lose 150 seats.
Yeah, and if it was based on that, that would be devastating. However, I often think about 2019 as a bit of an outlier anyway. That wasn't really... It didn't ever feel to me like a Conservative versus Labour race. It felt like Brexit versus non-Brexit, and it felt like let's stop the nonsense compared with let's continue the nonsense.
Yeah.
If you take ourselves back to December 19, the Houses of Parliament were just like a children's playground.
One problem I think with Rishi is, I mean, I'm going to actually defend Rishi. I'm not like the massive Rishi fan, but I may as well defend him a bit. He seems quite competent. He seems sort of genuine and to have a certain integrity around things like fiscal responsibility. He does things that are not that popular because he says we have to for the budget. But then again, like, who does he represent? Because I was talking to a taxi driver last night who said, no, he's Goldman Sachs, and Conservatives think he's not actually conservative enough. And obviously the left aren't going to vote for him. So the problem is, I mean, who does he actually represent?
You hit the nail on the head. It's not enough that people like you, it's that people really like you, that they come out to vote for you. I think, I mean, from what I can tell, people don't like, not that they don't like the guy, they don't like what the Conservatives have done over the past 5 years. They don't like the COVID business, which was so unconservative, it was so anti-libertarian and liberty. They don't like the fact that there's 600,000 people coming in, and he's sitting there saying, whatever he's saying, he's not doing anything about it. It's not getting done.
Yeah.
So he is, whether he's a nice guy or not, I like him because he's thin, he's probably non-diabetic.
Although is he a vegetarian? We need to check that.
Well, you can be a vegetarian and healthy if you keep your weight down.
OK, and just as a quick final note, It's not like Starmer is absolutely smashing it. He's dipped into negative territory for the first time, although he's doing disturbingly well amongst young people who just don't know anything about the world. Let's move on and do the Mail now. And Just Stop Oil activists could be stripped of their driving licences. Apparently lying in the road like a cretin isn't actually in the highway code, Paul.
Yeah, well, Just Stop Oil activists could be stripped of driving licences under new crackdown, it was revealed today. Judges could be given new powers to suspend motoring rights for those who breach public order laws. Now, this seems a little bit counterintuitive to me because Just Stop Oil want less people on the road. So taking away their driving licence is helping their campaign out. I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve here. What they're going to do next? Judges to take away oil licences to hinder Just Stop Oil. For me, they should just arrest everybody with purple hair until they can prove they weren't on their way to a protest and then let them go back to their home.
It's a great point. I mean, this law isn't, of course, it's not just for Just Stop Oil. It's that ministers are hoping it will be used against them because they're a sort of prime candidate for it. But yeah, it is. I mean, you do wonder if it will actually happen because the establishment seem to just be very soft on Just Stop Oil, and this would depend on a judge, you know, taking a sort of fair stance and not being pro Just Stop. Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it seems to me the establishment are kind of on board with Just Stop Oil. What do you think, Lewis?
I think they're on board with it. They want it. They want these. These are kind of the shock troops of it. And the operative word in the whole story is could. It's one of those. I've never paid this much attention to the news, and it's all a bunch of non-stories. This hasn't happened. It sounds like a couple of boys in the back making jokes. You know, Nick Dixon saying, maybe we should take their driving license away. That'll teach them. And is this a funny thing? Yeah, let's take their driving licenses away. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, it would be fun. Would be total bans, but probably not going to happen. Let's do The Guardian now with a solution to the massive number of people out of work. Just give them free money forever.
Yeah, which is this is in The Guardian. We'd like to give out free money, not theirs, basically, but it's the universal basic income. They want universal basic income of $1,600 a month to be trialed in 2 places in England. And so you think, well, the government is going to trial this, but it's not the government. It's some think tank called Autonomy, which is backing the plan. £1,600 is how much is that? Is that £20,000 a year? That's a lot of money to give somebody to. I would, I wouldn't be happy because I'm making hundreds and hundreds of thousands from this.
Yeah, sure.
But they've been given money whether they choose to work or not. And then the guy was founded something. Well, a woman is founding. It says no one should be facing poverty, having to choose between heating and eating in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. All evidence shows that it would directly alleviate poverty. Yeah, giving somebody £20,000 is going to alleviate poverty. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm suspicious. They tried it in Finland. Sorry to interrupt you. I wasn't sure if you were going to get to the end of the sentence. They tried it in Finland for 2 years. They gave them €560, and they found there was an increase in well-being. Who knew? Yeah. Because they gave them free money. Right. But also there was a slight increase, apparently, in employment, to where, for some reason, not particularly sure of, taking that pressure away did lead people to take other jobs. So that could happen. But, Paul, I'm a bit suspicious. It's basically socialism, isn't it? The money has to come from somewhere, which is taxpayers like you with your nice garden, and it goes to these people, because where else can it come from? And I'm not an economist, as you know, but I always struggle to understand why this doesn't just cause inflation. If you give everyone this amount of money, why doesn't that devalue this amount of money?
You're asking Paul. May I answer?
Go on. Yeah, go on.
The answer is it does cause inflation. That's what causes inflation, when you spend money you don't have to give to people who don't deserve it.
Nice. You sound like Leo Kirsten. Go on, Paul.
Well, it is socialism, isn't it?
It is.
It's very much socialism. I mean, 2 places in England. They're going to give this to Jarrow in the northeast, and they're going to give it to a town in North London, in Finchley, right? So I can tell you already what's going to happen. Yeah. The people in Finchley are still going to be hungry on £1,600 a month, right. And the people in Jarrow are automatically going to become some of the wealthiest people in Jarrow.
Mansions everywhere.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. This isn't going to prove anything. It feels like it's always the case, isn't it, that you need capitalism to support socialism. So this money's got to be generated somehow to be given away, and it feels like someone wants to prove a point that this can work. Doing it in these 2 places isn't going to prove anything.
And this is a trial of just, I think, 30 people, so it's not a major...
I mean, that's a lot.
Let's see what happens. My concern, lastly, is just that, what does it do to people? I believe it was Bobby Kennedy that said welfare rots the soul of a man. So will people still want to get jobs and be active? Let's see, anyway. Let's do the Mail. And my hometown of Cumbria is pioneering a bold new scheme, having actual policemen on the streets, Paul. It could work.
A seaside town has nearly halved its antisocial behaviour in less than a year just by introducing 1 traditional lone beat Bobby officer. Who would have thought it? I mean, we've all listened to people, well, perhaps our age, Nick, but definitely people over 50, saying for years and years and years that having Bobbies on the beat made crime reduce or kept it at a manageable level. And this is really just about, who did know? This is just about policing. If you have police and they're visible, it's a visible deterrent, and crime is likely to go down, Lewis.
I know, it's so obvious. I'm proud that Cumbria's come up with it. And all we ever need to do is follow Robert Peel's principles, because it's about policing by consent. And this guy has consent, because the local people like him. And amazingly, he's called Sam Steele, which just sounds like an ITV drama. Steele. And his catchphrase is something like, put them drugs away. Stop it. He's just like a nice local Cumbria guy. And what's really hilarious is they say they'll have a fight one day, and then they'll be friends the next day. And I love that. It's like old-fashioned policing, Lewis.
I think the story didn't actually give any numbers. So what's 47%? From what to what? You know, how many actual
Right, there's only 6
crimes?
people there.
Yeah, and the idea of having a Bobby on the street is totally, maybe you could do it in Maryport, which is probably a tiny little town in Cumbria, but you can't do it because they're on the beat, they're walking around, so they just can't cover all the different areas, number one. The only thing that stops crime is the death penalty.
What? See, I know what happened there, Luke. You were so sensible throughout this show, and you've thought to yourself, I'm being too sensible, I'll say something just wild.
I'm bored with myself. No, because it's like having somebody... No.
The death penalty for minor seaside crime.
Yeah,
like
you know what? You just got to kill one of them. You got to kill one guy who maybe threw his chips on the ground.
You're not going to kill my fellow Cumbrians. We've done this before. This is 1776 all over again.
Just some boys playing football under a no ball game sign getting mowed down by Lewis.
Yeah. Lewis comes up with his American policing, just mows a couple out.
They need to be punished.
Wow.
Is Whitehaven in Cumbria?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was, think of Americans. Americans basically invaded Britain at Whitehaven. Do you know the story about that?
No, but
we Google that, Whitehaven.
Talk about it for about 20 to 30 minutes. All right, sadly, we've got to move on. Very shocking scenes from Lewis there, but let's do The Independent now with a sentence you don't hear a lot. Good news from China, Lewis.
Well, I don't know if you're going to call it good news. I guess it is good news because it says China says that conflict with the U.S. would be, quote, unbearable disaster. That's another Kel Surprise story. I mean, obviously it'd be horrible if China... And the person who said this was the Chinese Defense Minister, Lin Shangfu. Lin Shangfu. That sounds almost made up. He says the two global powers should not stop seeking common ground and common interests to grow bilateral ties. The fact is, China would be proper screwed if they lost the American market.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, whose best interest is it to avoid?
Yeah, well, I thought it sounded like good news from the headline, but you look at it, it's actually about the escalation of nuclear war being possible. And the idea would be an unbearable disaster. Bit of an understatement of a word there, isn't it, Paul? Unbearable is like a play that goes on a bit too long. Unbearable. Like not being obliterated.
Like a stone in your shoe.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it does sound like an authentic Chinese name to me, I'll be honest. However, one point I will make is... I'm suspicious of why they're saying this. I'm very suspicious because it's so obvious. There'll be some tactic going on here and a Trumpian-level 4D chess that's completely escaped me. However, I'd like to see their words backed out with actions.
Yeah, and we've got to move on. Oh, sorry, we've got to move on. But I was just going to say, and the one thing we do need is Trump back to stop all this escalating, but just throwing that in there. That's it for part 2, but coming up, Russia are training whales, the smell of ancient Rome, and The Guardian tries to ruin fairy tales. See you in a minute.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to Headliners. Let's get straight into it with The Telegraph. And a father is trying to stop the NHS permanently mutilating his autistic child, Paul.
Yeah, this is quite the harrowing story, actually. A father is taking legal action against the NHS to try and stop surgeons performing sex change surgery on his vulnerable autistic son. So this quite clearly is an incredibly divisive story, and I'll try and be as sensitive as I can about it. I'm not sure I can remain impartial because I have fairly strong views on this. But the fact, let's look at the facts straight away. This is an adult. It's a 21-year-old man who has autism. Now, I don't know really what level of autism he has, therefore I don't know how much of an impact this has on his decision to make changes about his own body. However, all I can see from this story is the father's perspective, which is if this man, his son, is severely autistic in any way, then he would have had support and care most of his life. And therefore, his dad is assuming that role now. He's saying, I don't think that you should be doing this. And therefore, this is much more nuanced than an adult making decisions about their body.
Yeah, well, I thought I was absolutely sickened by this story. He had 2 appointments at 17. 2 appointments, 17 years old, and he's autistic, and he may develop later than other people, and he's already pushed into this direction. He was rushed into it. He was given puberty blockers at 16 against his father's wishes, and the father is arguing he can't really consent to surgery until 25 because he has autism, and that is when the prefrontal cortex fully develops and people become fully rational, so I think that's a good argument for anyone. And so I find it's absolutely disgusting. You've got this kid pushed into it, and also his father was told that if he tried to do anything about it, then the child may be taken into care. So the state will take your child off you if you say this shouldn't happen. And I find it incredibly disturbing and heartbreaking. What do you think, Lewis?
Well, the question in the story is, where is the mother? And I think that's one of the silent things that are happening out there. There's a lot of mothers against fathers with the determination of their children's sexuality and gender orientation. At the same time, there aren't that many of these happening. Like as we found out just the other day, there's only 355 done every year on the NHS, right, Nick? It's not that many, but each one, it is a tragedy. You only hope. I'm trying to be as political as possible here.
Don't be.
You only hope that a greater good to our society is done. I personally do not believe that you should. I'm even against tattoos now. At any age.
Well, I mean, it's shocking. He's got a history of bullying, anxiety, and the father's saying that he believes becoming a woman will somehow solve all his problems, but of course it won't. And they compare it to this story of Richie Herron, who was a gay man who had autism, so didn't realise, oh, I'm just gay, couldn't process it, and had this surgery, now can't go to the toilet, and has crippling pain all the time.
Yeah.
And there's just going to be so many stories like this.
There's so many conflicting aspects and facets to this story. I mean, let's just touch on a few things you've already said, Nick, and you say, Lewis, they're saying that it will take him away. They'll put him into care, like he's a child. If he's a child, he shouldn't be doing this. End of chat.
Right.
End of story. Full stop. I can't I can't overemphasise that. But it's a massive contradiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. OK. All right. Well, let's move on and do this related story about the BBC drama Casualty, Lewis.
Yeah, BBC criticised over non-binary Casualty character discussing top surgery, and it's for the show Casualty, which I've never seen. It's on the state propaganda network, the BBC, and the characters were discussing at 8:20 p.m., which is before the watershed, what they call top surgery, because it just sounds so much nicer than what's actually happening. I'm with Paul. I just think I don't even think an adult should have a right to have this done. I don't think that doctors should be allowed to do this.
You know, it's a good point, because there are certain conditions where people think, for example, they feel like they should have their arm locked off, and we don't do it because, of course, it's completely unethical. Right. So, yeah, I agree. And this clip is bizarre. I mean, the BBC are not doing themselves any favours. They've just done an interview with Andrew Tate. He sit back and said he's called them extremist in a new video today, which I found quite interesting, because this is extremist. There was this clip, I've watched the clip, and the person says, yeah, I'm going to get this double mastectomy, whatever it is. Then the other guy goes, oh, great for you. Let's have a cup of tea to celebrate. Yeah. And there's an older woman there who goes, good for you. And it's just like, is there any balance here? Is it just propaganda?
Well, that was the point I was going to make. I mean, it's not unusual for a soap opera, which this is, to take on the big stories of the day, because, you know, that's what they do. And the BBC has every right to do that. What I found really interesting about it is there was no character in there that was saying, have you given this any serious thought? There was no old-fashioned character in there who was maybe biased like we were, saying, you know what, I'm not sure this is a good idea. Have you thought this through? You know, are you able to reverse this? No, and they all just went, oh, that's a wonderful idea, let's have a cup of tea. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, there's got to be this is the wrong way to go about this. Now, I'm biased, that's what I'm trying to say. However, they could have they could have at least showed some conflict in that story.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to admit that there are millions of people, a very high percentage of people, who believe that that if you deny someone the right for them to alter their appearance to match their gender, right? I think that's what it is. Then they will be unhappy and possibly commit suicide. This is what they believe.
That's what they believe, yeah.
So
yeah. The last thing on that, I just want to say, it's also a family show. It's not some like edgy late night drama. It's a family show, and it was also the acting seemed pretty wooden. It's just kind of propaganda. It's kind of ideology that they're placing into this story with a very clear message. And I'm not sure that's the BBC's role.
Luckily, nobody watches the BBC.
There is that. So we've got to do the Metro now. And if you've ever wondered what ancient Rome smells like, well, you're probably a bit weird, but you're also in luck with this story, Lewis.
Yes, the perfume bottle from the time of Christ opened, which is 2,000 years ago. For people who don't, Christ was considered the Son of God by the Christian community. Okay, 2,000 years ago in Israel, so they bought a perfume bottle. It opened up, and it smells like hippies. And the reason so they found this funerary. How do you pronounce that? Funerary. It's an urn in Rome, in the Roman city of Carmo. Which is Cremona, which is near Seville, which is in Spain. So this is in Spain.
I'm not sure which word you mean. All I know is you definitely didn't get it right.
No, I definitely didn't get it right. Normally, I'm quite good at this. And they did an analysis, and that they had patchouli. Yeah. And patchouli is a hippie fragrance. I remember that when I was a kid.
And what's really interesting is they found this ancient thing, and it actually still smelled better than Lewis's breakfast, Paul. It says here.
Breakfast or breath?
I said breakfast.
They go hand in hand.
Meat with all the blood.
I think my breath would be better because I stopped brushing my teeth because
that's weird. We'll get into that later. Paul?
Yeah, other than to say that Lewis's breakfast does look like a car crash in a farm. I didn't know what patchouli?
Yeah, patchouli
oil. I had to look it up. It's kind of an earthy, woody, musky smell, which is probably the smell of the time anyway, because they were reliant on these scents. And we don't know. I mean, it was unopened. That could be the Lynx Africa of its day.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. We've got to go through these quite quick. Let's do The Guardian now. And apparently apparitions of the Virgin Mary are not always real. Disappointing news, Paul.
Well, absolutely. Apparitions of the Virgin Mary are not always real, as you said. Pope Francis has said in what appears to be an indirect reference to a woman who drew thousands of pilgrims to a town near Rome to pray for a statue that she was. This smacks slightly that the Pope is jealous of the attention this lady is getting. It feels that way to me a little bit.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, they're not all real. My ones are real. Their ones are unlikely to be real.
You know, drawing thousands of people to the site.
It's not ideal, is it?
And also drawing over 123,000 euros from one person alone.
Yeah.
She was a scam artist, so she's saying, you know, he's saying be careful.
Yeah, the thing that got me was when she'd been convicted of bankruptcy fraud. That was a red flag. Call me a cynic. That was a red flag to me.
I've taken a different angle, but you're absolutely right.
And someone said it was pig's blood, not other. Yeah. Anyway, I still believe in Jesus, but I don't necessarily believe in this woman. Let's do The Guardian now, going full Guardian with a think piece about why we should rewrite fairy tales to make them woke and rubbish, Lewis.
Well, you know, I read this and I thought to myself, this actually made sense for The Guardian. Fairy tales have always reflected the morals of the age. It's not a sin to rewrite them. And I think they are right, is that over time, fairy tales, and they mention a few fairy tales like Peter Pan and whatever, have changed over time. And this was because the movie The Little Mermaid featured a black Ariel, and the truth is that Little Mermaid is basically co-opting Danish culture because it was written by the Danes.
So, I mean, I think I've got a slightly different take on this. The point is, they do reflect the morals of the time. That's the whole point. And that's the thing that's being protected. No one's saying that you can't have a different story, but at least write it yourself. So generate a new fairy tale to represent the moral of our time, whatever that might be right now. So going back and sort of rewriting other people's work is where I struggle with all of this.
Whose work is this? I mean, these are fairy tales.
Okay.
They weren't...
So I will distance myself from the whole Black Ariel thing. I don't really, you know, who cares?
Yeah.
All right, we've got to move on and do the Mirror. And Russia are training whales to spy on the West. Has devolution gone too far? That was my first thought, Paul, but it actually means the large marine mammals.
Yes, it has a bit. Russian Special Forces, whales and dolphins trained to spy and kill Western foes. Now, we know why they're called killer whales. However...
There you go, there he is.
Look at that. I mean... This is like Free Willy After Dark, which is something I don't recommend anyone Googles, by the way.
That's on his spy whale.
That.
That one's definitely
real. Is that AI
real.
generated or is that real?
This one's real as well.
That's real as well.
With a sort of sniper scope there.
Hench.
And this one he's behind enemy lines. One of them was real, guys. See if you can work out which one it was. The real one was funny enough. We almost didn't need the AI.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean... What are they doing? This is what I don't really understand from reading this. They're kind of trained to maybe if someone comes into their territory that they see as a foe, I don't know how they identify that, they might kill them.
What was funny to me is it had a GoPro camera on its head when they found it, and it had an inscription saying, equipment of St. Petersburg. Now, if you were spying and sending in spy whales, would you really write that? I think it's a double bluff psyop from the Russians to make us think they have spy whales. Lewis?
You want to know something? They probably do, because this is old news, because there was a film called The Day of the Dolphin from the 1970s, and it was all about this. It was about how the U.S. government took over a program to develop dolphins to make them killers. The Day of the Dolphins.
OK.
Look it up.
Well, we've learned a lot tonight. That's it for this section, but coming up in the final part, a woman sues her husband for going out with someone older, Hannah Gadsby cancels Picasso, and how to tell if you're a psychopath. See you in 2 minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Let's get into it with The Mirror. And a woman is suing her husband for age discrimination for dumping her for someone older. Now, I'm no legal scholar, but something seems a bit off to me, Lewis.
This is a story, and I think maybe Paul should talk about it because it's so complicated. Basically, a guy, this woman who was 60, she sued her spouse, Tim, who was 72, to an employment tribunal because she was fired after ending the marriage. And she felt that she had been wronged because she had been like some slighted little woman who was wronged. And Tim says this is rubbish because the woman that I'm supposedly with now is older than she was, and that I couldn't.
Yeah, basically the guy. I mean, she had a flat with she shacked up with some other guy in a 1.2 million house 3 doors away. So he said, right, I'm sacking you from the company. Then she said, well, that's wrongful dismissal, and also you've been going out with someone younger. He then proved he was going out with someone older.
It was one great big contradiction. I mean, as well as bringing back bullying into schools, I think we should start teaching shame as well. This lady, had absolutely no shame. She was chucking mud all over the place to try and win an argument, whilst she was doing exactly the same herself.
And you know what? If there's ever a time to say it, Lewis, I think this is the death of love. I really do. Yeah. And have you seen this other bit here? Someone's written, a wealthy accountant sued her ex-Olympian husband for age discrimination after thinking he left her for a younger woman. The age difference being described as Schafarian. And I believe that's our producer having a bit of fun. I don't think that's in the original.
It could be.
That is shocking.
It could be. I think it's coming.
Shocking.
I mean, it's a bit of, it is the death of love because you think to yourself, this woman, as Paul mentioned, this woman was basically throwing mud, accusing him of stealing money from people, and just anything to win this case.
All right, well, let's do the Mail. And Disney have laid off staff due to the failure of a new Buzz Lightyear movie, To Infinity and Beyond paid employment, Paul.
Walt Disney Pixar Animation Studios has eliminated 75 positions, including 2 executives behind box office flop Lightyear. Now, I hadn't seen Lightyear. I'm not 7. Had anyone else seen Lightyear?
No.
I mean, Lightyear cost $200 million to make, and it made $226 million, which is an 8% profit. It's not bad for a film aimed at children and people who,
No, it isn't, because the company doesn't get the $200 million. It's the rental fees. It has to do with there's promotion involved. That's a loss. That's not a victory.
No, I'm not suggesting it's a victory. It's not a smash hit, but
no, it isn't even a hit at all.
This is a non-story, isn't it?
Well, because over time, the business that they're in, eventually it goes bad. Occasionally, they laid people off 10 years ago. It wasn't front page news.
It's a bit of a non-story to me. I'm just amazed Disney have sacked him because they have all these awful woke movies that tank, and everyone keeps their job. Anyway, let's do this one. It's more interesting. The Mail and Hannah Gadsby is taking some time off comedy to focus on her true passion, cancelling artists that people actually like. Lewis.
Yes, she did a thing at the Brooklyn Museum. It's Hannah Gadsby, who is a comedian from New Zealand. I think she's from New Zealand. Australian. She's Australian. And sorry.
Seamless. She's one of those New Zealand Australians.
I want to apologise to New Zealand. Anyway, is roasted by art critics after launching her own Picasso exhibition in the United States. And she went into the Brooklyn Museum, which is an amazing place. I went there with my 2 kids last year. It's one of the best museums in the entire world. It's in Brooklyn. It's like imagine a Bermondsey kind of museum that's as good as anything in Manhattan. Anyway, so she did this thing about Pablo Picasso, where she was not happy with Pablo Picasso because he was famous for being a winner with the girls, the young girls. All the girls, all the women.
So, Paul, she did this exhibition. It's been pretty much roundly slammed. And it's called Pablo-matic, and it's about why Pablo Picasso's awful and misogynistic, but everyone just said this is rubbish. What do you think?
Well, a terrible pun straight away. This is your first art exhibition. Get the pun at least half decent. This is the Emperor's Clothes all over again. If you keep telling people they're good, eventually they'll believe they can have an art exhibition.
At the Brooklyn Museum.
And it will be rubbish. And do you know what? We see this as being panned, but there are whole swathes of people on the other side of the argument that are going to tell us how brilliant this is.
Right.
All right, well, let's quickly do this last one. In the Mail, and there are 2 types of people who never yawn. Firstly, anyone watching headliners, and psychopaths, Lewis.
Yes, quite interesting. It's a warning. If you know somebody who does this, they might be a psychopath. And that's in the Daily Mail. And what this is not yawn when they see other people yawn. I think it shows a bit of empathy. They got no empathy. Is that they don't move their head very much. Right, that they tend to move their hands a lot, and that they have unusual sleeping habits, which pretty much all comedians do, right? And they have more hand gestures. And finally, they love to talk about food.
Yeah. It talks. Yeah, that's interesting, Lewis. Saying nothing, but I mean, and it talks about a dark triad test. I actually got lighter than average, Paul, although not all my ex-girlfriends did. In 20 seconds, Paul, sum up this story for us.
This story has been written about Lewis Schaefer.
Yeah.
Didn't even need 20. You didn't even need 20 seconds. Lewis, in 8 seconds, is there anything else you
sorry,
want to say?
I could have done more.
I want to say, tweet me. I want to thank Paul. I want to thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy.
Okay, and it's Lewis's last show ever. It's not really.
It's not. Don't tell him that.
The show's pretty much over, though, so let's have a quick look at Monday's front pages. So, the Telegraph goes with lockdown benefits a drop in the bucket compared to the costs. The Daily Mail has record demand for 35-year mortgages as rates keep rising. The Eye goes with Generation AI most fearful of losing their jobs to robots. The Times has unions lambast Labour over naive energy plan. The Sun, Phil, I won't watch Holly. I also feel the same. And finally, the Daily Star, where oven-ready Brits. And those were the front pages. So that's it for tonight. Thanks to Paul and Lewis. It's not his last show, despite what he tweeted. That was just a little joke. Simon is back tomorrow at 11 p.m. If you're watching at 5 a.m., then stay tuned for breakfast. But for me, it's good night, good morning, and God bless.
Is it my last?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel.